We now come to the urgent question. Alex Burkhardt, Shadow Secretary.
To ask the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster to make a statement on the Cabinet Office review into Labour Together and ABCO Worldwide.
Secretary Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Freedom of the press is a cornerstone of our democracy. The government is committed to upholding and protecting that freedom. Journalists must be able to do their job without fear or favour, including holding politicians of all political parties to account on behalf of the public that we all serve. In the last week, there have been a number of media reports about the actions of the think tank Labour Together in 2023 and 2024. Some of those media reports have included allegations about the conduct of the Joint Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State between the Cabinet Office and the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, the Honourable Member for Makerfield, who was previously the Director of Labour Together. As the Prime Minister confirmed last week, he asked civil servants in the Cabinet Office Proprietary and Ethics team to establish the facts. As members across the House will know, all civil servants are bound by the Civil Service Code, which dictates that they act with integrity, honesty, objectivity and impartiality. The exercise to establish the facts around these allegations was bound by those principles. That work has now concluded and the facts have been reported to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has been advised that the matter should be referred now to the Independent Adviser on Ministerial Standards, which the Prime Minister has done today. Mr. Speaker, this is not a new process, but a continuation of the process the Prime Minister has started, and the Prime Minister will make a judgment when he has received the advice from the Independent Adviser. This will happen very soon, and his advice to the Prime Minister will be made public in the normal way. The Independent Adviser is appointed to provide impartial, independent advice to the Prime Minister in line with his published terms of reference. The current Independent Adviser was appointed under the last administration by the Prime Minister's predecessor and is independent of the government. He will provide his independent advice directly to the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to reiterate again that a free and independent press is an absolutely essential part of a free, open and democratic society and is one of the things that makes our country great. Representing the public as a minister is a privilege and a duty, and public scrutiny is rightly part of that. The government is committed to protecting freedom of the press, and no journalist should ever be intimidated for trying to hold those in power to account.
Alex Burkhardt.
Thank you for granting this urgent question, sir. And the details of this story are quite extraordinary, even by the standards of this government. Whilst director of the think tank Labour Together, the now Minister for the Cabinet Office, the member for Makerfield, paid a PR agency to investigate the backgrounds and motivations of British journalists who had written about Labour Together's breaches of electoral law, of which there were many, more than 20, the most famous being a failure to declare £730,000 worth of donations. The agency produced a report which included an allegation that those journalists in question had relied on Russian hacking. Needless to say, those reports were entirely spurious. The Minister has claimed that the agency acted beyond its brief, but in the past few days an email from the agency to the Minister has been published showing that he was shown that a, quote, human intelligence investigation into these journalists would take place. That investigation included details of one journalist's Jewish faith and made claims about his ideological upbringing and personal relationships. The report was then circulated to key members of the Labour Party and to GCHQ, who swiftly said there was no case to answer. Mr. Speaker, this looks, to all intents and purposes, like a deliberate attempt to smear and intimidate journalists whose only crime had been to report that Labour Together had broken electoral law. As of today, it is very difficult to see how the Minister's position is tenable. The referral to the Independent Adviser, which the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister has just announced, is the right thing to do, but it should have been done immediately. It should not have been the case that this was dealt with internally in the Cabinet Office, where the Minister in question is a Minister. He's a Minister with responsibility for inquiries and whistleblowing. You couldn't make this stuff up. And so I must ask the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, why has the Minister not been suspended whilst this investigation is going on? We must also ask, because he refers to the work of the Proprietary and Ethics team, we must also ask about the membership of that team currently, because it is known that a political appointment was made to a civil service role of a woman who was previously an employee of Labour Together. Does he now accept that that appointment was wrong? It must also be the case, Mr. Speaker, that very many people took money from Labour Together. The Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, the Foreign Secretary, the Home Secretary, the Deputy Prime Minister, the list goes on. An organisation set up to conceal the source of its donations from the public and from the Labour Party. Is it not time for an investigation into Labour Together?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll take the questions in reverse order. The Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster accused me of taking money from Labour Together. That is not true, Mr. Speaker. I had a number of seconded staff into my office as a shadow member of the Shadow Cabinet, which, as I'm sure members opposite will know, is an important contribution that's made to political parties when you do not have access, when the opposition doesn't have access to the civil service. But no money was taken, not £1, not one penny, and seconded staff were reported in the proper way. So I hope that the Shadow Chancellor might be able to revoke those comments when he gets the opportunity to do so. His second question was about the investigation being led by the Proprietary and Ethics team. I can confirm that that was led by a senior member of staff, which is not the member of staff he was referring to, who reported directly to the Prime Minister. And his first question was why the Minister in question is not suspended whilst this investigation is taking place. It's because the establishment of the Independent Advisor on Ethics can only investigate ministers whilst they are in office. If the Minister had been suspended or removed from office, the Independent Advisor would not be able to undertake his work, and the Prime Minister thinks it's important that the Independent Advisor is given the opportunity to do just that.
The Secretary may be aware that at the end of this week, the UK takes on the chair of the Global Media Freedom Coalition, a partnership of 51 countries pledged to protect journalists and the freedom of the press. How can the UK have any credibility in that role, given the revelations of the behaviour of a member of this government, which are more akin to that of the worst authoritarian states?
Secretary Jones.
I think the right honourable member talks down the country. The UK is rightly proud of the freedom of the press and its role in our democracy, and I know that both his party and mine support those principles. He's referred to allegations that have been made, and that's why an independent process is looking at the veracity of those allegations and any denial that is put to them. And as I say, the advice we put to the Prime Minister to make a call on that as soon as it's been made available.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The actions of Labour Together are viciously despicable. Any attack on the freedom of our press and individuals is unforgivable. The Minister keeps referring to an independent ethics advisor and at the same time admitting that his only remit is as far as the Ministerial Code of Conduct. The Minister needs to be reminded that the actions referred to are before the Minister was a sitting Minister. So I say this to him: these actions are such that they will cause irreparable and tremendous harm to the government and party. Only an independent investigation into all the actions of Labour Together will suffice. Why will he not understand that?
Secretary Jones.
I thank my honourable friend for his question. The investigation that the government is conducting in relation to the Minister is independent. The ethics advisor is independent, as I have alluded to a number of times. And the independent ethics advisor is able to look at the ministerial code, but also the circumstances that are being asked in relation to the questions put to him, and his advice will make reference to that, I'm sure, when he comes to advise the Prime Minister. As I've said, I know that the honourable member will be disappointed by this, but the government can't instigate an investigation into a private organisation unless there is a legal basis to do so. And so it's therefore a question for the board of Labour Together whether they wish to undertake any work on behalf of the allegations that have been made in the media.
There's Savile Roberts.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Dyfaredd. There are real concerns that non-UK state actors, such as the commercial PR organisation APCO, and possibly Palantir Technology, are selling services to carry out surveillance with the purpose of smearing journalists in the United Kingdom. So if his government isn't just uttering polite, meaningless words about protecting journalists, surely now we need an independent investigation for this to move beyond process and within that to look at how to regulate such non-state actors?
I'm afraid, Mr. Speaker, I don't know the veracity of the allegations that the Honourable Lady makes, but I can share her concern that if that were to be true, it would clearly be unwelcome in the United Kingdom. And if laws and regulations need to be updated to prevent that from happening, then of course this House should consider them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll go for the Chief Secretary's statement. I'm wondering if he could clarify the actions that would be taken by the government should the investigation come back and it decides that there are further questions that need answering.
The independent adviser will write a letter to the Prime Minister following his investigation, which will detail the facts as he understands them, the case that has been made by the parties in question, and the independent adviser will then draw some form of conclusion on which the Prime Minister will then need to make a decision on how to act. And those options can include, as we've talked about in the House this afternoon, an agreement for the Minister to continue in post or not.
Rick Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has today said that the independent ethics adviser will now investigate. Is this not another example of how poor the Prime Minister's judgment was by initially saying that the Cabinet Office can investigate the now Cabinet Office Minister? Was ludicrous. It was never going to be independent. It was never going to be comprehensive. The U-turn today is just so his Cabinet Secretary has something to talk about in today's statement, which the Shadow Minister, has dragged him to the House for. Why is the Prime Minister's judgment constantly so bad?
Secretary Jones.
I think the Honourable Lady might be slightly confused, Mr. Speaker. The independent adviser on ethics is independent. I'll happily mansplain it to you, if I may say so, Mr. Speaker. The independent adviser is independent. There is a process that is followed because it's proper, that proper process is followed. And I remind the House, as I alluded to earlier, the reason this process exists, the reason the ethics adviser is independent, was because of the repeated failures of the previous administration to make sure that ethics issues were dealt with properly. And so the referral to the independent adviser has been done promptly, following fact-finding, and they will report in due course.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Now, when the Prime Minister came to power promising to clean up politics, he declared that journalism is, and I quote, the lifeblood of democracy. Now, we all know that Labour together helped mastermind the Prime Minister's own personal rise to the highest office in the land, and that they stand accused of running an orchestrated campaign to smear and discredit journalists. I think the Prime Minister should be here in this House answering questions, but my prediction is that day will come. So, in the meantime, does the front bench agree with me and an ex-founder of Labour Together when I quote him in saying that this is some dark shit?
Order. Mr. Leishman. No, you'll withdraw it, won't you? Yeah, stand up. I think I want a bit more respect, please.
Please accept my apology, Mr. Speaker. I'll withdraw the bad language.
Mr. Speaker.
Right. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I take the Minister back to the very strange answer he gave to the question from the member for Bradford? The member for Bradford was asking for a full inquiry into all of the actions and activities of Labour Together, including the behaviour of Morgan McSweeney and the current member for Makerfield. I want the inquiry to also extend to the undermining they did of the Labour Party leadership between 2015 and 2020, the systemic briefing, the systemic attacks, and the general undermining of the interests of the Labour Party whilst claiming to be supporting Labour Together. A single inquiry by a single person doesn't cut it. There needs to be an open, much more public investigation, not just into their behaviour, but also into their sources of funding, the expenditure they made, the donations they made, and would he confirm that political donations are not just cash payments, they're also secondment of staff and the use of facilities, all of which ought to be publicly and openly declared and clearly have not been.